Hello boys and girls, welcome back to my channel called the Yu-Gi-Oh Project, where I am going to make a modernized deck for every character from the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. To continue the last week's mini-series, today we are doing the second episode in the Meklord deck series. And the topic of today's episode is Lester, one of the three pure nobles of Iliester. Lester, who is apparently named after an English cheese type, is one of three parts of Aporia together with Primo and Jacob, and is Aporia's childhood incarnation. When he first interacts with other characters in the 5D anime, he portrays himself as a long-haired ginger character with some degrees of soulfulness, but we eventually find out that he's a little piece of shit who is just annoying all the time and, in my opinion, is the worst of Aporia's incarnations. I will stop blabbering about Lester and spoiling the 5D anime story, so let's just see if Lester's deck is better than his personality. Surprise surprise, Lester's deck is even worse than his personality. In the anime, he plays a Meklord Emperor Skiel deck, a deck that is centered around the before mentioned monster, which is the worst Meklord monster, period. It cannot negate spells like Emperor Weisel, and it cannot beef itself up like Grenelle to insane attack points, but it can attack directly with mere 2200 attack points if it gets rid of its equipped Synchro monster, which you will be very unlikely to equip in the first place. But I somehow managed to crown this piece of shit of a card as a centerpiece of the deck. With the recent Meklord support, it's not very hard to bring skill out, but it is very hard to keep it on the field. I solved this problem by utilization of Union monsters, which protect Emperor Skiel and also allow it to attack directly. Then I am also using some traps to control the game, such as Summon Limit, and I also employed some hand traps to prevent our opponent from doing anything stupid and too impressive. This deck will also be constructed according to the 6 deck building rules of the Yu-Gi-Oh project. And before we get to the deck profile, please like this video, subscribe on my channel and tell me in the comments below what do you want to see next. So in this deck we are playing 1 Gear Golem, the moving fortress, because it was played by Lester in the anime and serves as the activation cost for Small World. 2 copies of Heavy Mech Support Armor, which is in the deck to strengthen Meklord Emperor Skiel, granting it a targeting prevention. Then 3 copies of Ash Blossom, which stops opponent's plays, but a good alternative would be Dimension Shifter, if you happen to be playing against a graveyard relying deck, as our deck relies hardly on graveyard effects at all. Then 3 copies of Meklord Emperor Shite or Skill, as it is written on the card, which is the centerpiece of the deck, and the player of this deck is probably going to win with this card, but the cost and annoyance will be plentiful. Then 3 copies of Nucleus Infinity Core, the best monster in the deck, which allows us a Meklord spell or trap search and can cheat out Meklord Emperor from the deck. Then 2 copies of Torque Toon Gear to raise the attack of Skill, protect it from destruction and to allow it to attack directly. Then 1 copy of 1-for-1 to summon Nucleus Infinity Core from the deck, 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance for draw power, since our deck does not rely on extra deck at all, 2 copies of Small World to search Nucleus Infinity Core, and an alternative would be Piri Rise Map, but that card is played by Tenzen Yanagi in the anime, so it is disqualified from the deck by channel's rules, but I think the deck would be stronger if you employ Piri Rise Map instead of Small World. 2 copies of Unauthorized Reactivation to strengthen skill with Union monsters without summoning them, 2 copies of Limited Removal to beef up skill when it makes a direct attack, so it does a substantial amount of damage, then 2 copies of Meklord Deflection to protect skill from destruction, then 1 Supply Squad, which works nicely in this deck, generates a lot of draw power for our deck and replenishes our hand, since we will be popping our monsters with effects a lot. But if you are playing against a monster heavy deck, you can substitute this card for 1 copy of Loop of Distraction, as that card can clear opponent's monster lineup quite effectively in this deck, as we have no trouble in fulfilling its activation requirement for monster destruction. Then 3 copies of Meklord Deployment to search Nucleus Infinity Core and to destroy our monsters to fulfill skill's summoning requirement. 1 Mech-Time Blast to deal with opponent's problematic cards. 3 copies of Torrential Tribute, which is played by Lester, and it works wonders in this deck, as it completely shuts down certain decks by blowing their entire board up. and it fulfills Emperor Skill's summoning condition. Then 3 copies of Summon Limit to control the game, since our deck hardly summons more than 2 times per turn. And finally 3 copies of Dimension Garden, which serves to protect Skill and is better in this deck than Safe Zone, as the ladder prevents Skill from attacking directly and also does not prevent it from our own effect destruction. In the side deck there are some cards which are alternatives to the cards that are already in this deck, and some cards are used by Lester which do not synergize well enough with the other cards in the deck. Then in the purely utilitarian X deck we're playing Nightmare Monsters to deal with opponents' problematic cards, Linkuribo to prevent opponents' monsters from attacking by reducing their attack stat, then 2 copies of Almirage to prevent our monsters from effect destruction, and 3 copies of Relinquished Anima to steal opponents' monsters. But all of these cards in the side deck are here mostly to be banished for the cost of Pot of Extravagance. And that would be it, my friends, so let's see the deck in action.